You don't have a gun, do you? Well, then I'll tell you. You two, all of you come with me. You're going to be manning cannon. And best be careful they don't explode. We've got some Molly pitchers. You'll fill a pitcher with water, won't you? As long as you're here, lass, we'll have you do that. And you can do it too. And keep the cannons cool. I don't care much about the men. But I want those cannons cool so they can fire against them Hessians. Huh? What kind of mouths have they? Oh, why, looks like they have 2 mouths? Could it be? Oh, maybe it makes them better when they go out to forage for food. Yeah, they'll be stealing cabbage and... Well, I reckon we got about 9,000. Fear not. I'll get as many boats as I can. We'll get them across. It takes all night, we'll do it. That's what I like to hear, says Washington. Glover went to work. He had boats and bateaus that they had lashed together and salvaged from around the shores. But they needed more. And so his men went to work in a twofold way. You men are going to be building rafts. Maybe they'd be about the size of this tarp right here. Some of them had boats. And the others were pulling hard, rowing across. And they knew well enough to take their paddles and pad them with cloth, so that even as they dipped in the water wouldn't splash loud enough to be detected by redcoat ears. Then, on the banks of the Hudson River, during the wars of the French and Indians, as it was called, the 7 Years' War, some say the First World War. Now there at Fort Craylow, outside of Albany, sat a British surgeon by the name of Shuckburgh, and he gazed out and saw a sloop landing. And disembarking, he saw some ragtag-looking men coming up. They are getting from Connecticut. And then he pondered, and he thought about how, for the longest time, and even in the times of the French-Indian Wars, Albany was really known as Beverwyck, Beaver Village, where the beaver skins were brought by the Mohawk for trade with the Dutch. The language you hear on the streets of Albany would be Dutch, and the Dutch had a kind of nickname for settlers from Connecticut, who often would come and kind of invade Long Island. And back in the days in which I speak, I hope no one takes offense, Brooklyn, Queens were well known as being part of Long Island. I know many of you will object to that notion, but unfortunately it's a geographic truth. But these Connecticut settlers would come down, and they were of English origin. And you know what that meant? They ate the stinkiest of cheeses. Would anyone like to know what the cheeses smelled like? Would you like to know? Well, you can come and smell my stocking. And thus, the Dutch began to call them Jan Kees, or something to that effect. Jan means John, Kees means cheese. And they would sometimes hold their noses when the English settlers from Connecticut would pass by and broil it and go, Jan Kees. Man, do you smell Jan Kees? Well, so they began to call them that, and they made it a little quicker when they said, Yankees. Yankees. So now, Dr. Shuckburgh remembered that. And he looked at these Connecticut fellows and saw them with a feather in their hat, marching in a jaunty way, and he thought, look at them. They think all they need to do to be dressed in the finest, fanciest fashion is put a feather in their hat. And then they are dressed like macaronis. Macaroni was someone who expressly went for high fashion. They would wear 6-inch heels, white powder on their faces and hair. They would paint little hearts on their cheeks. They would put decorative features on their hair as well, wear floral embroidered waistcoats. And this was just the men. The women have their hair sometimes 2 feet high, and they would adorn them with birds' nests and little wooden battleships. That's macaroni style. And now, these fellows from Connecticut come thinking, oh, they need to stick a feather in their hat, and they call that macaroni? Ha ha! I've got to make a song with that. And then he thought of a popular song in London called Lucy Locket. It was something like, Lucy Locket out of pocket, she filled it up with flowers, went around and gave them out, and now she lost her powers, something to that effect. So he thought, I'll change the words. Let me see. I'll begin with Yankee. Oh, there's a Dutch word for someone who is not very smart, like these Connecticut fellows, and that is a doodle. Someone who has just dead branches in their head. So here we go. Yankee Doodle went to Albany. Yankee Doodle went to New York City. How about Yankee Doodle went to town? Now, how would one of these colonists travel to town? Especially when they are like children and need the king and his army here to protect them against the French. Oh, these colonists, they would ride upon a pony. There's my song. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Yankee Doodle, keep it up. Yankee Doodle, oh, you're a dandy, all right. Mind the music, watch your step, or else with your girls we'll be handy. Ha ha ha! Thus the song got born in the French Indian Wars to taunt the American colonists. And when the American Revolution came along at its beginnings, 'twas said that Americans conspiring against the king, coming out of a tavern led by the likes of Paul Revere, saw some British redcoats there, and they began to sing that taunting, bullying song at the colonists. Yankee Doodles went to town riding on a pony. He stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Yankee Doodles, keep it up. Yankee Doodles dandy. Mind the music, watch your step. And with your girls, we'll be handy. That prompted those rebelling against the king to pack snowballs with ice and throw them at the redcoats, trying to knock off their tri-corner hats. And in the midst of that, bam! A gun went off, and as Paul Revere described, it became the Boston Massacre. But both sides began to sing that song at one another, making up verse after verse after verse. Why, they even dragged George Washington into it. And there rode General Washington upon a strapping stallion, giving orders to his men. I guess there were 1,000,000, as if to say to the redcoats, we're going to have 1,000,000 here rebelling against the king. But the redcoats, they retorted with various versions of the song, and on it went.